Okay. So, Space Game is just this stupid little framework of gaming that I built. Uh, Super simplified, pretty terrible, um, and could be done better in so many ways. But I had a couple of different goals in mind when I created some of these tools for you. One is to make it understandable, um, so you could understand all of the pieces of it, um, and be able to build on top of it, and but yet be easy to use. Um, so only so complicated and cool of a game you can make with those things in mind. So the 10,000 foot view of this, we're doing something completely different. This is still JavaScript, of course, but this is all based on HTML canvas. And I would urge you to look up HTML Canvas and go through the tutorials on W3 Schools if any of this is confusing. So, Canvas is a rectangular area on the HTML page. Mine happens to fill up the whole screen. You can draw items into it using code. So we can use code to draw things into it. So we can draw circles and shapes and draw text, draw gradients, draw images. Okay, and so we're utilizing much of those little features there in the game. And you can use whatever you have at your disposal. You can use anything that works with Canvas. You can use in there. So, ba, 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 ba. My chat went away. Did anybody ask anything? Okay, no. Okay. All right. So the project is you can take whatever code I have here, add your own. The all you have to do is make a playable game. Okay. You should utilize your own graphics and make a playable game. And that just means a game with a winning state. Okay. So what makes something a game is that you can win or lose. So in this case, there is no winning or losing state. So I can move the keyboard. I'm using the arrow keys to move. If I press the up and to the, if I move up and to the right or down and to the right, I can move diagonally. So I'm allowing for multiple keys to be pressed simultaneously. And then I can shoot by pressing the space bar. And uh, and the bullet moves in the general direction of the enemy. So there's some logic in there to detect that. So when I'm underneath it, it shoots up. When I'm off to the left of it, it shoots straight left, and it increments the score as it travels across the player. So, of course, that's not how games usually are. Usually, you maybe have a damage indicator, and then you score points somehow, or whatever. Right? There's different ways games are played. So you have to just make it a game. Doesn't have to be fun, but you have to make it a game. So hopefully you have a lot of fun with this. So let's quickly go through the code and stop me if you have questions. Let me make sure. Okay. So, okay. So first of all, HTML, the simplest HTML we've had. This is all of it. It all fits basically in one screen. So we're linking to our style sheet, which also has basically nothing in it. We have one div for the pause feature. I didn't demonstrate the pause feature. I think it works. If I hit the escape key, yeah, it pauses the game, so I can't press the cursor keys right now and do anything. And the player can't do anything either, or the enemy can't do anything either. And it shows a big pause graphic over the top. And I can hit escape to turn it on and off. It toggles it on and off. Then I have the universe, and I have canvas inside the universe. So the universe is this space background attached to it, and the game board is everything written on top of it. So the score and the players are all in the canvas. Okay, so that's it for the HTML. So we really don't even have to go back to the HTML at all, because all you have to remember in your brain is pause, universe, and game board. Okay, that's all you gotta remember. So let's look at the CSS real briefly. So I just have some things to make sure that everything's full screen for the most part. Okay, so body overflow hidden, the universe 100% wide, 100 high. I'm setting the background position absolute, overflow hidden, top 0 left. So this is just making sure that it fills the whole screen. Same thing with the pause button. I'm setting some transparency on the pause button so you can kind of see the game below it. I'm setting the Z index so that it is on top of the game so you can see through it. And I have a hidden element, which is used for pause to display and not display the hidden. So most of that stuff is should be relatively self-explanatory. We didn't really talk about absolute position or overflow at all. We can talk more about that on Monday. There's also a lot of information on W3 Schools about that too. So spacegame.js. We have a few. This is object-oriented again. We have a few things here. Some global functions, some global variables, and then we have our objects. So I'm going to just kind of compress these real quick, and then we have our main structure of the program here down below. So kind of go from top to bottom. So I have some constants, and these constants are just setting up some English words for the key code values that are used. So when you read key code values in, they're numbers. So space bar is 32, right arrow is 39, escape is 27, and you could memorize those and you could just use those in your code, but that would be kind of cryptic. So it's much better. This is a perfect example of the use of a constant to replace those. So escape key code. You don't have to remember what that is. This is much more clear. So that's a perfect use for a constant. I have these Boolean values to allow for multiple keys to be pressed at once. So these are set to false by default. And I'll touch on that later in some fashion. Because I'm using random numbers to move the enemy around, I have a get random int function that I'm calling. So I can just change this in one spot if I want to change how I'm doing my randomness. It kind of jerks around a little bit, so you could smooth that out, certainly. Create a better random movement system. This is just our friend by ID again. Don't even know if I need that. I don't even know if I'm using by ID at all. That could even maybe go away. No, I'm using by ID right here. So I am using it. Okay. So let's look at ship. So I'm using, one of the benefits of object-oriented programming is we can utilize the same code for multiple things. So I have a ship object, but I can use that for both the enemy and the player. So without getting too complicated, the player and the enemy have more things in common than they have differences. So they both have the same height and width in my case. They both are going to appear randomly when they start on the screen. They're both going to be based on an image. So they have the same basic properties. They're going to be based on an image. They're going to have different images associated with them. So they have the same basic properties. They will have boundary check will be the same. And boundary check just checks to see if it's off the screen to the left, the top, the right, or the bottom, and then adjusts it appropriately. So what that means is if I press to the right and I am holding the right arrow key down, it won't go outside of the universe. Or if I go all the way to the left, it won't go beyond 0. It won't travel beyond 0. And it won't let that happen for the enemy ship either. Even though it's randomly generated, it can't go off the screen. Navigate is something that only applies to the player, but this code can be in here. So this is where we're going down to the right key down equals pressed. So we're allowing multiple keys to happen at the same time. And we're using a switch statement here. How do you get the background movable like that if it is a JPEG? Haha, yes. I will get to that. Excellent question. So move ship. The move ship, whenever I move it, it moves 5 pixels at a time. So you could change that. In fact, this should probably be a constant set up at the top, so you could just change it in one place. And then every time I move the ship, I do boundary check. Every time I navigate, I do boundary check. So I'm checking boundary check all the time. I don't even know if I need to always do boundary check. Probably don't need to do it each time, but yeah, I think I only need to do it on move ship and move random. But so move random is only used by the enemy ship. And this is where it gets a random number between 1 and 10 and decides if it's going to move left or right. So it determines, am I moving left or right? Am I moving up or down? And then it gets the amount of those and then moves it that much. So very basic movement. You could certainly do something more sophisticated. You could have it chase the player, for instance, something like that. And let's see. And that's it. That's all I have for the ships. So it's actually pretty basic logic there. Okay. So and the bullet is really almost identical. The structure of bullet is almost identical to the ships. So it has a laptop width, height. The width and height are different, but same kind of thing. We have a flag, whether it's visible or not, because sometimes it's not visible, whereas the player and the enemy are always visible. And it's an image again, same way. So the structure of bullet is really the same. So boundary check is the same. I probably could have abstracted that out in some fashion, made those both descend from a common class in some fashion. But these are a balance. I wanted to keep things simple too. So set direction. So this is where I check to see, I pass in the values of the enemy ship, and then I do some calculations. So I pass in the player and the enemy, and I determine which direction it should shoot. And it shoots in a straight line to keep that simple, but you could do something something more sophisticated, do a curve or do a diagonal line or something. So how do you move the background is first question. How can you make the enemy ship have a random but frequent movement? So I will circle back to how we are polling the movement. That's another great question. So the bullet shoots itself. So that's a function of the bullet. So it's checking for the space bar. And then if it shoots, it actually plays the launch MP3. You guys didn't hear that. So that happens and it moves. So that's the same. Movement is really the same. And I do have a rate for this. So I do have let rate equals 2 here. Okay, so that is that. And so we're kind of going inside out here. So, and then game contains a ship, an enemy, and a bullet. So I'm calling a new ship, and one of the parameters that ship takes is player. It takes the actual file that we want it to be created with. So the enemy ship, I'm passing it the file name images, and that's over here, images/enemy.png. And the reason these are PNGs is because they have transparency. Okay. So that's pretty straightforward. Oh, I have a Boolean value to say if whether the game is paused or not, and I do have a points value there you can utilize. So a lot of these things, no matter what kind of game you make, a lot of these things will still be usable. Display points creates that little rectangle up in the corner and displays the total points. So this is where it prints out score and the total points. The rectangle is probably a little bigger than it needs to be, but it makes a white rectangle and it makes the letters black. And it's 30 pixel Arial for the font. You can change that, of course. And so you asked about the background. Move the background. So this is the answer to your first question, Javier. So this is move background. So if the game is not paused, so this exclamation point means not. So if the game paused is false. So if the game is not paused, then I grab the universe. I grab the computed style. So this is we're grabbing basically the some positioning data from the element, and then I'm grabbing the x and the y from this, and then I'm increasing this by 10 or by 1. I'm sorry. So I'm just basically updating this stuff, but doing a little math to just move this thing by 1 in the x-axis right here. And this part here, we're just it's because there's some extra information here. So we're doing parse int, and this is just a parameter on parse int. Okay, so that is that, and then this final thing just updates the actual position. So we have to this is kind of a hack. It's kind of ugly, but we have to send it as pixels. So we have position is set up like this as a string. It's sort of weird. Yeah, it's really weird. But anyway, so that's that. And I don't know why this is in the console log, but it is. Probably don't need that there. All right. And then, so there's a loop that kind of runs that, and you'll see that down below. So whatever the loop time is, every second or whatever, a bunch of things run. Okay. So one of those things is clear the objects. Okay. So this clears the ships from the canvas. So this removes the player ships. So clear rect just deletes the player ship, clears the enemy ship, and if the bullet is visible, it clears the bullet. Then we redraw them. Okay. So every second because these will have new values, we redraw them. So we delete the old one and we redraw a new one. We delete, draw, delete, draw, delete, draw. And these things all are moving, so they have different positions. And it looks smooth because computers are fast, and this is moving relatively fast. And then this is just where I'm checking the keys and setting some variables if, as that happens. So if hit the escape key, then I just set up the escape condition where I'm pausing. If things are not paused, then I clear the object. I call navigate on the player ship. I call shoot on the bullet to see if I'm shooting. Display points, and I draw objects. Okay. And where am I calling release keys? Is that in here? I don't remember where I call release keys, but this is to I think that might be in the up above where I'm checking the key presses up above. So this was adding a listener for the. Am I setting that up down below? Release keys. Yeah. Okay. So I actually set that up down below. Okay. So I'm calling release keys globally. So So this runs in the background, and this is checking to see if I'm pressing the key, and then I'm doing things appropriately based on that. So I'm calling navigate, I'm clearing the objects, displaying the objects, drawing the objects. And then this is something that you might not think you have to do, but check resize. So when you resize, the size of the universe changes. So if I resize the window, I have to make the game adapt properly. And it does. So I can, it still stays within the screen no matter how big this size is. So that's what that does. This is where we check for collisions. So this is checking for collisions with the bullet. So it's checking specifically for collisions with the bullet and the enemy ship. You can adapt this as necessary. It looks pretty complicated because it has to get the coordinates of the all four corners of the bullet and all four corners of the enemy ship to see if any of those points touch. So that's what we're doing here. We're seeing if any of those 4 points cross. So that's what this is all about. Oh, and I think we're out of time, right? So let's stop it at that. And we'll circle back on Monday.